Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Wrestling with Memories. I am Fash, the $1 million fan, and I'm joined by my co-host Wax, the Brain Hussein. How's it going, Wax? What are you up to in this heat wave in Glasgow?
Oh, it's incredible, Fash. The sun is shining. It's almost 30 degrees every day. I've never known weather like this. So I've been out and about quite a lot, heading to the beach after this show as well, Fash. I offered you a ride, but you refused.
I heard you've been working on that beach body.
Not very much. Not very much at all. But yeah, excited, Fash, to get back to what we love best, and that's old school wrestling.
Yeah, and we're going to turn up the heat today as well because we're on the road to SummerSlam 1992. We're back to our main timeline of looking back at the year 1992. For anyone that's been watching the show Loki, there's alternative timelines going on here. Recently, we've done, a series of 25th anniversary shows. We certainly really enjoyed talking about those, and you can check them out in the archives. But we're now back to our main business, Wax, and it's the period after WrestleMania 8. So maybe you can give everyone a little recap of where we were when we left off this main timeline.
Yep. So based on what we're going to be talking about later on today, let's just cover the main event really, which was Hulk Hogan versus Sid Justice. The end of that match, very poignant because Hogan we thought was retiring. In comes Papa Shango to save or to join forces with Sid Justice to beat down Hulk Hogan, and that's when we hear that famous music of the Ultimate Warrior, and the fans going absolutely crazy as Ultimate Warrior runs down the ramp towards the ring and saves Hulk Hogan, gives a beat down to Papa Shango. And, we've got Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior posing at the end of the match. And, in the build-up, we've been talking a lot about Hulk Hogan retiring and leaving the WWF. And really, it seems like it's a handover to the Ultimate Warrior for the years to come. And it seems like we're on the road to a build-up between the Warrior versus Sid Justice.
Exactly, and that's exactly as you say was where we left it. So you've got Hulk Hogan supposedly moving away into the sunset. How wrong we were, and the Warrior, as you say, he's been handed the baton. He's back now. Last time we saw him was in 1991 at SummerSlam, but he's going to be the main guy. And yeah, it's the natural feud, right? It's the biggest heel in the company outside of Ric Flair versus the Ultimate Warrior, the big babyface. And actually, Wax, the next few tapings of Superstars and Challenge is very much positioning that feud. So you see Sid Justice coming out talking about the Warrior and what he's going to do to them. Warrior also comes out with a bunch of fans and talks about his feud with Sid Justice, and they're on this collision course. And I guess at the time we would have thought this will be built up all the way into August, probably into SummerSlam 1992, but really it's only a few tapings, and certainly I think 2 to 3 episodes of Superstars where this feud is being talked about, and then suddenly and abruptly it just stops, and we learn later on that Sid is actually out of the company.
Yeah, and it's weird because obviously back in those days you don't really have the magazines around for us to look at, and the internet was obviously not a thing, so we wouldn't really have noticed until in fact we probably didn't even notice that he left. We probably just moved on to the next thing. Which we're going to talk about today. But yeah, it was odd, and it would have been a great matchup. I mean, it might not have been a great wrestling match, but it would have been a great matchup.
It was the personalities, wasn't it? The intensity.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of rumors flying around about why Sid left. Wonder what your thoughts are, Flash. I mean, the one I've heard is obviously that he was in disagreement about how the overall outcome would be that Warrior would come out on top.
Yeah, so there's two stories here, two tales over time, I guess, main ones. One is that Sid actually failed a drug test before WrestleMania 8, and they were going to suspend him post the event after a few tapings. And he was like, screw this. I'm not doing that. I'm not taking a suspension. And he left. And then there's Sid's version of events, which is actually, as you say, he started on the house show circuit against the Warrior, and the Warrior wanted really quick squashes, and he didn't want to sell Sid's powerbomb. So supposedly after the first few of these matches, Sid said, I'm not doing this, and I'm walking out. And that's been Sid's version in recent interviews. So in both cases, Sid walked out, but it's this which narrative you believe. And it was very abrupt. And as you say, at the time, you wouldn't know. You were just like, 1 week Sid's there, and then suddenly there's something else going on, and then you'd have these kind of discussions in the playground, people saying, oh, X is left, but it was not based on any information. It was just literally because somebody's disappeared, just like the Warrior had disappeared in the summer of 91. So sadly, Sid, we'll touch base with him again in the future, but we've talked about his rise. I don't think anyone's really went in as depth as we have since his debut at SummerSlam 91 all the way to this point. But so much promise here, Wax, and he was definitely positioned as the top heel, but either story, whichever one you want to believe. I think the man shouldn't have left when he did, and certainly it took his career back at this point, and it obviously created a headache for Vince McMahon and the creative team.
Yeah, it's interesting to think back what would have happened if they kept Sid face all through this
Yeah.
period. Warrior maybe never came back, and Sid Justice became
Yeah.
the big babyface that took over Hulk Hogan's position. I mean, he could have gone on to be a megastar.
And supposedly that's what Vince wanted, right? He saw that, and Sid once again says that he wanted to be a big nasty heel, and others like Kevin Nash have said this, which to me doesn't make sense. When when the big man wants to make you his top star, you go with it. And we've detailed how popular and over he was.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a very odd end, and really it was a stop-start run for him with the injury, the comeback, and then this situation. But the bottom line is, after a few superstars, if you go back and watch these and Wrestling Challenge online, you'll see that the Sid chat drops, and then suddenly we see our man, the man that debuted just a month or two ago and had the big role to play at WrestleMania 8's main event. Papa Shango suddenly appears in a vignette. And Wax is going to place a curse, a spell on the big man, the Ultimate Warrior.
One of the most memorable characters I think that WWF have ever produced. This voodoo doctor of some sort of, from, I don't know where he was from, but a very memorable character. Just his whole face paint, his sort of get up was just tremendous. And you used to have that wrestling figure we talked about, which you couldn't find anymore.
Which I still can't find. I was really hoping to find it for this episode, but sadly, I can't find it. It's misplaced somewhere.
Yeah, but yeah, Papa Shango to the fore. We see him on an episode of Superstars. He's got a twig figure of what is supposed to be the Warrior, and he mangles it a bit, and he says he's cursing the Ultimate Warrior. And I think in the same show we have a Warrior interview or response to that segment where he goes, "Yeah, I'm still walking. There's nothing wrong with me." In his typical manner.
Yeah, so I think actually it's the same set of tapings, Wax, but they do this on a weekly basis. So you see, the first one is because I love this kind of WrestleCrap food, and I'm going to get your thoughts on later because people malign this storyline. But let's go back to '92 and the kind of stuff that people loved. Right, it is like the best and worst of wrestling because of how far out and bizarre this is. But actually, right, he starts off with that little twig, and there's this kind of layer and flames in the background. And supposedly, looking back at things, I think he stole a wristband of the Ultimate Warrior, so he uses that. But you're right, it's actually the first episode. The angle is he places the curse, and they've got the picture of the Warrior, and it's on fire. Then what happens is the following week, actually, Warrior's not responding to this. He's got a match with Nasty Boy Knobs.
Yep.
I just can't get rid of these Nasty Boys. For anyone that's watched the archives, Wax is a fan of the Nasty Boys. I certainly am not. But there's a one-on-one match, which on paper just sounds horrific. And it's not so great in the ring as well between these two, which Warrior wins. But at the end of it, you see Papa Shango coming out. He's in the aisle and he's doing his kind of voodoo stuff.
Yep.
And Warrior's on the apron. And it's then Warrior holds his side and suddenly collapses. And the commentators, I think it's Vince McMahon and Mr. Perfect, they're talking about the curse of Papa Shango and how it's coming true.
Yeah, Papa Shango does this amazing trance-like thing when he's doing.
Can you copy that?
I don't even want to attempt to do it live, Fash. But it's tremendous the way he put on this performance whenever he does that. He's sort of shaking violently, and he's got that thing in his hand, and he's cursing Warrior. And you're right, he's stolen the wristband from the Warrior. And using that, he's able to put this curse on the Warrior. Warrior seems to have some sort of stomach issue, and he's writhing around.
His appendix is burst.
His appendix is burst. He's in absolute, agony on the floor, and we have to get a stretcher job done on the Warrior. But just before we talk about that little scene at the end of that show, Warrior was getting a tremendous ovation from the crowd during this match, and when he came in and cleared the ring. So he really was, firing on all cylinders, the top babyface in the company at this moment. And it's amazing that wouldn't obviously last for many years anyway.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? This is why we love 1982. And you obviously were telling me offline that you went back and watched everything as I have and everything is not as great maybe as you remember it because it's a bit slower and sedate. But one thing that is true is just how over the Ultimate Warrior is, and people, we as kids loved him, and it wasn't about how great a worker he was. It was just the kind of the character of the superhero. But as you say here, he's vulnerable, And do you remember this post episode scene then, which is a little bit disgusting in many
I
ways?
do, yes. It was actually tremendously done. Though, so you got the Warrior on a stretcher in the back, some medical staff there and other wrestling backroom staff, and all you then see is Warrior just vomiting out this horrible green yellow liquidy stuff. Very well done, I've got to say, and
It was,
it's just absolutely disgusting. And but
what I
Warrior
remember is he
sold it.
actually pukes up right in one guy's face. So I hope that guy was paid well. I don't even care. Obviously it wasn't sick, but there's still the stuff that fell from Warrior's mouth
Yeah.
into this guy's face. So please go back and watch this. It's hilarious. But yeah, as you see, if you're watching this as an 8-year-old, you're like, oh my god, the Warrior's gonna die here. What's going
Yeah.
on? And it was, as you say, done so well. It's wrestle crap. I don't care. But
Yeah.
one thing you can't accuse the Warrior of here is he sold the shit out of this. To make it look as if he was
More than he sold anything in the ring, he sold.
Exactly. He sold these storylines amazingly well. And I think recently Charles Wright, when he's been on the circuit, for the interviews with various podcasts and shows, he's spoken about how he enjoyed working with the Warrior and the fact that he did sell all this voodoo stuff more than anyone else had. But you see it there with him being sick and, Vince McMahon on commentary just absolutely disgusted, shocked, scared by what's going on.
Well, we know Vince loves puke, in reference to the character that Droz played a few years later. But anyway, the following week from this particular episode, we got a Papa Shango interview or vignette, and he now says he owns Warrior Spirit, and again does a tremendous job on the mic. Really comes across as this crazy, weird character that he is.
Yeah.
And it's in that same show we get the Warrior interview, that famous Warrior interview with Mean Gene. And the first thing I noticed, Warrior coming out in this tremendous jacket. I really love this jacket. It's white. It's got a Warrior symbol on it, a WWF symbol on it. And if I could buy one today, I'd buy it. But it was very nice. But anyway, Warrior says he has recovered and he's stronger than ever. And I really enjoyed his delivery of this whole promo, and just throughout this period, I thought he was actually delivering really
And this
well.
is what people keep ignoring, right? They keep saying, "Oh, no Warrior promo made sense," and blah blah blah. If you look at some of this stuff here, and even in '96 when he came back, it wasn't way out there.
No.
It was, it's still obviously a bit crazy because it's the concept of the storyline and Warrior. But you got what he was saying. It was simple, effective. You know who the good guy is, the bad guy. So I think once again, our man Jim Hellwood gets a lot of flack because people hate him. But as you say, the delivery was good. Me, I didn't really like this look. I know you said you like it because I just felt he looked. It was still the period where he was looking a little bit weak and with the shorter hair, and I was a bit like, he sounds like the Warrior, but in this scene, to me, didn't look like the Warrior as such.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that in terms of his face and his body. If we look back to the WrestleMania main event with Hulk Hogan, he looked absolutely peak Warrior. I just love the jacket.
Jacket. Somebody buy
eBay.
Maybe somebody will get in touch from our viewership. Maybe has it, and you can drop some dollars there.
Well, anyway, as he's talking to Mean Gene,
this is the big moment, Wax. Take us through
it. A tremendous moment. As he's talking to Mean Gene, suddenly we see this black gooey liquid just falling from his scalp, from his hair. And when you watch this, you think, how the hell did they do it? How did they do this? Obviously, this was like 20 years, 30 years ago. It's crazy. And we see that black scalp coming through his scalp. And then Warrior just looks weirdly at his hand and shouts, "Warrior!"
And then Warriors, and he just walks away.
Yeah, and he just walks away. And I don't know whether he forgot to sell the goo at that point or what happened, or we were just going crazy with the goo. I don't know.
Because I watched it again this morning, and it is that, as you say, he says Warrior, then Warriors, and it's point, and then he kind of just looks at his hand and he kind of stumbles to the back. So I think that is Warrior selling it, but not selling it. But just this moment, I think, is the one moment that everyone remembers.
Yep.
This Black Goo moment. And I remember vividly in the playground, because once again, I wasn't watching this stuff because I didn't have Sky, but the little kids around me, and maybe one of them saying, "Oh, Papa Shango put a curse on the Warrior," and this black stuff coming down his face. It was goo. And I couldn't wait to see this.
Yeah.
And I think I got in touch with yourself, and I was saying, "Did you watch this?" And he said, "Yeah." I was like, "I need to see a tape of this," because it was just so different.
And if you're a kid, it's very believable. And the thing is, you see these great audience reactions throughout this period of people just looking in shock or awe or fear. Yeah. You see a lot of kids just blank face staring, like thinking, "What the hell is going on?"
And to your point, you don't know how it's done now. we can now speculate that he probably had something in his hair because he's got long hair and you press it and but even then, right, it was a good visual and it was just so different with this kind of black goo, which represents the voodoo of Papa Shango. And, recently, do you know, back early this year, now some of our fans at the time probably thought, what is this about? The younger fans. But this all trended again on Twitter because Randy Orton had a storyline with Alexa Bliss and Bray Wyatt, the Fiend. And if you remember, he puked up this black goo and they were using the black goo again. So Papa Shango was trending back, I think, February, March. So it was a callback to this storyline. So it's something that people should check out if they want to know what the original was about. But ultimately, so the big storyline angles happen, Wax. Now we're going to get a few weeks of more of this where Papa Shango is going to terrorize jobbers in different ways.
Yeah, including... there's one character who comes in the ring looking absolutely terrified of Papa Shango. Really sold it well. I think the lights go out and on one, and we see him lying there with his feet on fire, or his trainers on fire. On another one, we see the guy's palm on fire.
Yeah, and he looks at it and he kind of runs away.
Yeah, and
that one looked a bit fakish. You could tell the guy had something on and the selling wasn't great, and he runs to the back.
But we're very much showing the supernatural powers of Papa Shango throughout this period, and just showing what a beast he was on camera at least. And we'll talk a little bit about what was happening behind the scenes on house shows.
Of that, the fact the lights going out. I didn't realize this until watching this back. Was really Papa Shango before the Undertaker.
Yeah.
So, because the lights go out and then they come back on, and as he says, either somebody's on fire, or there's the black goo again on the jobbers as well in each one of these, and there's something else going on. So Papa Shango character was the one that actually started this lights out thing. But sandwiched between these jobber matches, Wax, is the Mean Gene Okerlund segment as well. Do you remember that?
I absolutely do. And again, this is a very memorable moment of 1992. We've got Papa Shango coming out for an interview, on that stage that Mean Gene always does his interviews on. And Gene is absolutely terrified of Papa Shango while he's speaking and, saying his usual stuff about cursing the Warrior and all sorts. And then Papa Shango, as he leaves, he sort of turns around and blows the smoke at Mean Gene. And Gene's hand suddenly goes limp.
Yep.
And then he starts looking at it, and then there's the black goo coming out of his sleeve onto his hand. And again, that was just really well done, and I really enjoyed that segment.
So there once again this black goo, which we're seeing throughout. The commentators sell it great. Mean Gene sells it great, though. I think you can tell that he's pressing something in his arm now when you watch it. But as a kid, once again, it's like, what is this black goo? Where's it coming from? This is the most scary heel around. Because you got to watch this as a kid, guys. It was 1992. Don't apply logic to it.
Yeah.
The fact was, this Papa Shango was one bad man.
He was. And, over the next couple of weeks, we get a couple more promos from either side. But that's the issue then. It sort of fizzles away, and then we don't see anything on TV. What happens?
I know. So I think, this feud is essentially dropped. Or if you watch the 18th July 1992 Superstars, it's dropped. And, we certainly have the announcement for SummerSlam 1992, and it's got nothing to do with Warrior Papa Shango. You would have thought would be one of the main matches at this event. They announced Warrior versus the Macho Man, Randy Savage, for the WWF title, and this is just thrown to one side. And we'll talk about this in a future show, Wax. It seemed Vince McMahon threw a whole bunch of storylines out the window and started again. But yeah, this is dropped, and the only matches actually between these guys were on the house show circuit. Yeah. I think there's a few on these kind of Coliseum home videos that you can see. There's a few tag team matches which are interesting. So there's one that you can see online, which is the Warrior with Bret the Hitman Hart after Bret won the title against Papa Shango and Kamala. It's a bit further down. Mm-hmm. At this period exactly, you've got The Undertaker and the Ultimate Warrior versus Berserker and Papa Shango, and then there's single matches. But all around this, Warrior won each of these matches. But yeah, we never ever got a blow-off match, not on a Saturday night's main event. Not on any kind of pay-per-view.
Yep.
It was just dropped. And I think this is what people go back and kind of scratch their heads with. Yes, the matches were terrible and they've been discussed. If you watch any of them, they're not good matches. You didn't expect them to be. Warrior always needs somebody good to carry him. And Papa Shango, Charles Wright was probably still a bit green here, so he wasn't going to be the ring general. So the matches are not great, but that didn't stop matches from happening at this point. But yeah, we don't get a payoff in the traditional sense to this feud, which is a little bit weird. So that's why people just remember these big angles.
Yeah.
And then we explain to you, well, how did it end? Because let's say you watch the 4th of July superstars, and you watch the next taping, and that's it. It's just kind of finished.
Yeah, and if we revisit this era particularly, we've only got 4 big pay-per-view shows.
Exactly.
And then we've got the occasional Saturday night's main event. So, and none of that happened within this period. So where would they have had that blow-off match? It would have had to be on a Superstars or Wrestling Challenge. And they never really had those big matches on those shows at that time.
Not at that time. But I think, at the time you would have thought they would take this all the way to SummerSlam, because if you look at the other feuds that were going on, you felt that's where it was ending up. But maybe it was the quality of the matches, the fact that Vince suddenly had a different problem to solve. They were going to Wembley Stadium, and we'll talk about all that stuff, that it just got dropped. But the fact is, it got dropped, and that was it. And people call it one of. I saw Bret Hart has said it's the second worst creative concept behind the Gobbledygooker, but I like the Papa Shango character. You've seen other people say it was terrible. There's others that think it's quite fantastic in terms of what we like and the fun element of wrestling. Yeah. But it was a shame that I didn't get a blow off. But this takes me to my next question, Wax, because for me, this killed the Papa Shango character, because straight away he was up against this kind of big superhero, big babyface. And if you're repeatedly losing, even if it's not on TV, and the feud just drops, where do you go after that? And the question that's linked to that is, why did Papa Shango get this prominent position straight away? And the question I have for you is, and it probably ties up, we're there the night after WrestleMania 8. Who are the big heels in the WWF?
Well, there's not many, is there, other than Sid Justice, who we know is going to leave the... And we've got Ric Flair, who's obviously up against Macho Man, but...
Yeah, so we got Rick, right? We've no longer got Sergeant Slaughter, who was terrible anyway, so he became a babyface. Yep. Jake the Snake Roberts is gone,
He's
and we'll discuss that in every episode. The Undertaker, he became a babyface. And we've talked about 91, where, Undertaker and Jake were the MVP. So when you look at it, as you say, they've got Sid, they've got Ric Flair, and then you start scratching your head. There is no one else. So this newcomer who's been kind of put in a prominent position because of the run-in at WrestleMania, who wasn't supposed to feud with the Warrior, they've just said, well, fine, this guy's got a bit of steam behind him. We'll just put him in this position because Sid's gone. But then that's had a detrimental effect, because if you look at it, I agree with you, he did play the character well. And I think Charles Wright has said that he didn't enjoy being Papa Shango because it was so dark and it was against his personality, but he really bought into the stuff. He was reading Voodoo stuff. He was trying to, bring the character to life. But I think when you have a character that's strong and it's got the mystique around them, once that mystique goes away, it's very hard to rebuild it. And I think, we talk about the Undertaker character, how it was just bulletproof throughout. And there was that shades of grey where you could be a babyface. With a character like Papa Shango, you can't really turn him babyface down the line either, because of what the ethos of the character is.
And you're right, he came in only a month before his big sort of his first pay-per-view at WrestleMania, so he never really got to build up against anybody. He never got to defeat any of the sort of mid-card babyfaces. So his whole persona was sort of ended after losing to Warrior week in, week out on the house shows. But I mean, I think he played the character really well, and I think there was plenty of potential there for something with him and Undertaker, or that would have been.
I don't know why that feud never happened. And Kamala comes in later, and we'll talk about that. And maybe there's some other politics behind that, but that was just a natural feud storyline. But I mean, if you look at what happens to Papa Shango after this, he's going to take on people like El Matador, who you're a fan of, not so much. They actually tried a storyline, which I had totally forgotten about, with Bret Hart. So supposedly, when Bret Hart loses the title to British Bulldog at SummerSlam, they did a few weeks of, Bret might have lost it because the Papa Shango placed a curse on him. And they do this kind of mini feud, but I think Bret wanted no part of a storyline to do with the curse and stuff. And then he defeats him on Saturday night's main event. And after that, it's just,
after that, he's just somebody.
He's losing to like Hacksaw Jim Duggan. He's going to lose to Mr. Perfect. He's going to be a very quick entrant in the Royal Rumble 1993. He loses a dark match at WrestleMania 9 to El Matador, and then he just disappears. So it's a very, kind of big fall down the card. After this kind of initial promise, and I guess because a lot of people panned the storyline, but afterwards maybe not, and this goes back to the Warrior. He was right up for this storyline, but others perhaps weren't, and the Papa Shango character is going to fall by the wayside, but Charles Wright certainly will return. But do you know, Wax, as we get closer to the end of this episode, I guess, that there was 2 times in the future that Papa Shango was potentially going to return, but it never happened?
No, I can only imagine it would be one of these anniversary shows.
Nah, so this is the thing, viewers, check it. So 1994 is the first one. So you'll remember the famous Bob Backlund Bret Hart feud.
Yep.
And when Bob Backlund snapped and started looking at his hands and he's going a bit crazy, what I've heard and what I've read is the initial plan actually was that, why is Bob acting so weird and strange? It was meant to be Papa Shango that was controlling him and put a curse on him, and he was then supposed to be the man behind it and feuding with Bret Hart. But then because Bob was doing such a great job as this unhinged personality and he flipped it into different areas, that got dropped. And then we saw Kama, the Supreme Fighting Machine, instead.
Yep.
And then the next one is the biggest one, and actually people who watch the WWE Network might have seen this in his series with Steve Austin and the Broken Skull Sessions. But in 1997, they were thinking about bringing the Papa Shango character back in a more gritty persona. And the idea was the whole Paul Bearer Undertaker feud before Kane came. At one point, it was supposed to be Papa Shango that was involved in that storyline, now either as the big bad or part of the Kane thing. Now, from my understanding, it was he was going to be the big bad, and maybe he had resurrected the Undertaker after the fire in his home or something like that. So there's actually pictures available of what the Papa Shango character would have looked like in that avatar, and we'll put the pictures up and you can see them now as our visuals. But it was very different, and it was supposed to be much darker, and it would have really fit into the time. But when we think about it, if you have something like that, maybe we don't have Kane.
Yep.
So there's that knock-on effect. But anyway, he says that one day he was ready for it. He'd shot the pictures, and Vince McMahon just called him into his office and said, "Nah, we're not doing that anymore." And that's why we saw Kama in the New Nation with Farouk. And supposedly, he, if you go back and watch that episode of Raw when he returned, he cleanly pins the Undertaker, and that was supposed to be a kind of, to make it up to him. So there you go, 2 times in the future where Papa Shango was supposed to return. It's a character that still fascinates everyone. But I guess if all that happens, we don't get the happy Godfather, and I'm sure everyone enjoyed the Godfather back in the late 90s.
For various reasons, I can imagine. I mean, Charles Wright, a tremendous, team player. He's been around for so long now.
Yeah.
A backbone of the sort of a backstage BSK sort of team with the Undertaker. So very respected. But I think if I pick any of his characters that I like the best, I still put Papa Shango up there as number 1.
I'm like you as well. I mean, everyone enjoyed The Godfather. It was fun, but it's like, others have, I think this character, as you say, had so much potential to go into different areas. Maybe if it would have been some years down the line, he was more experienced and the storylines, he had more kind of backing, similar to what an Undertaker character had, and others were willing to kind of feud with him and have storylines. It could have been different, but then we don't get these other iterations when it comes to him. But certainly people still talk about this storyline today, so it might be stinking and wrestle crap to many, but the fact is it's memorable, and wrestling is all about the memories and the big moments that you remember over time, and this certainly is a storyline that still is very fresh in people's minds if they go back and think about it.
I wish there was a big blow off to talk about, but unfortunately there isn't for this one. But I mean, in our future episodes, we're building up to SummerSlam 1992. We've got lots to talk about, and the angles that are building up to that. We've got the whole SummerSlam coming to the UK element, which was the first and only of its kind. So really monumental year, and past SummerSlam, if we look at it, that's when things really change. We've got new people at top at the top, and all those old faces are slowly moving away. But we'll leave it there. We'll catch up next week, Fash, on our next episode. And talk more about 1992. Until then, he's Fash, I'm Wax, and this has been Wrestling with Memories.
Warrior!